Stop scrolling for just a moment, because what happened inside a Manchester hospital this June was not on any official schedule, not on any press release, and not something the Princess of Wales had ever fully said out loud before. For 2 years, Kate Middleton kept the hardest part of her cancer story behind a closed door. The world saw the polished video messages, the careful statements, the gradual return to public life. What it did not see was what the illness did to the people who loved her. And then, on a quiet Thursday afternoon, surrounded by strangers who were fighting the same fight she had survived, she finally let that door swing open. In a single sentence, she revealed more about her private battle than 2 years of headlines ever managed to. Prince William, in his own rare moment of honesty days earlier, had already hinted at it. Together, what the future king and queen confessed in the space of a fortnight has quietly become one of the most human revelations the modern monarchy has ever offered. This is the story of what they said, why it landed the way it did, and what it tells us about the kind of king and queen Britain is about to have. Let's break it all down. It begins with a visit that almost nobody knew was coming. On the 4th of June, the Princess of Wales arrived at the Christie NHS Foundation Trust in Manchester, one of the largest specialist cancer centers in Europe, a place that treats more than 60,000 patients every single year. There were no weeks of advance promotion, no carefully trailed announcement designed to build anticipation. It was, in the truest sense, a surprise. Kensington Palace later confirmed the trip had been arranged so that Kate could spend real time with patients, families, and the staff who care for them, not as a photo opportunity, but as a genuine act of solidarity. For a senior royal whose every movement is usually mapped out months in advance, an unannounced solo engagement of this kind is unusual. And the choice of place mattered. Kate did not pick a glamorous backdrop or a ceremonial setting. She chose a working cancer hospital, the kind of room she herself had sat in not so long ago, when she was the patient and not the patron. That decision alone told you something about where her head and her heart were. This was not about being seen. It was about being present. What unfolded once she was inside is where the surprise visit became something far deeper. Kate is famously, fiercely private about her own health. The type of cancer she was treated for has never been made public. Throughout her illness, she guarded the details with a discipline that frustrated the tabloids and protected her children. So when she began to speak openly, candidly, about how her treatment had affected the people around her, it carried real weight. As she moved through the wards and the well-being spaces, she did not talk about her diagnosis in the clinical, careful language the public had grown used to. She talked about her family. She spoke about how hard it had been for her children and for her own parents while she went through chemotherapy in 2024. And then she said the line that traveled around the world. Speaking to one patient's loved one, she explained that the illness is never carried alone, that those closest to you live every step of it with you. You go through it with them, she said. 5 plain words, but for a woman who had spent 2 years saying almost nothing about the personal cost, they were a revelation. She was telling the truth that every cancer family knows and almost no royal ever admits in public, that the patient is never the only one in the fight. The moment that crystallized all of this came when Kate met a 30-year-old mother named Claire Lauren. Claire had been treated for breast cancer, and on this particular day, she had reached the milestone every patient dreams of, her very last chemotherapy session. In cancer wards across Britain, there is a tradition for that day. The patient rings a bell, and the sound carries down the corridor to mark the end of treatment. Claire's partner, Pablo, was there. So was their young child. And as Claire stepped up to ring that bell, the Princess of Wales stood beside her, not as royalty looking on, but as someone who knew exactly what that sound meant. Kate encouraged her gently, telling her this was her day and urging her to go on. When Claire became overwhelmed, Kate folded her into a hug and told her she had done brilliantly, that it had been a tough journey, that what a day this was. Then she turned to Pablo and embraced him too, telling him that it is just as hard for the family and the people who love you. Watching staff and fellow patients broke into applause. Cameras captured Claire dissolving into tears in the arms of a princess who had, not long before, been ringing a bell of her own in private. There was no script for this. You cannot rehearse the particular tenderness of someone who has stood exactly where you are standing. That is what made the room go quiet and then erupt. It was, by every honest account, a moment that left the people in it momentarily lost for words. To understand why Kate's candor mattered so much, you have to rewind just a couple of weeks, because Prince William had already cracked open the same door. On the 22nd of May, the Prince of Wales did something he almost never does. He sat down for a live radio interview, joining the presenters of Heart Breakfast for a special broadcast from the Isles of Scilly. Most of it was light. He joked about the school run, talked about his love of dance music, and even revealed he still follows his late grandmother's rule for making scones, cream first and then jam. But somewhere in that easy conversation, the talk turned to Kate, and William let his guard slip in a way the public rarely gets to see. Reflecting on everything his wife had been through and her return to royal duties, he said he was so proud of her. He called her an amazing mother and an amazing wife. And then he added the words that made headlines, that quite literally their family could not cope without her. Coming from a man who has spent his whole life being trained to stay composed, to keep the private, it was a strikingly bare admission. He was not performing devotion for the cameras. He was, for a few seconds, just a husband who had nearly faced the unthinkable and knew it. Put William's confession and Kate's revelation side by side, and you start to see the bigger picture taking shape. These were two people, the future king and the future queen, separately and within days of each other, choosing to tell the truth about fear, about strain, about love under pressure. To appreciate the full weight of it, remember where they were 2 years ago. In January 2024, Kate underwent major abdominal surgery. The following month, she quietly began preventative chemotherapy. In March of that year, she recorded a personal video message to tell the country she had cancer, calling the news a huge shock, a phrase that landed all the harder for how composed she remained while saying it. The palace had kept her treatment private in the early weeks, and that silence fed an ugly storm of online rumor and speculation that she and William endured rather than answered. By September 2024, she was able to share that her chemotherapy was complete. In January 2025 came the word everyone had been praying for. She was in remission. And around the same time, William, speaking to reporters during a trip abroad, had described the previous 12 months in language no spin doctor would have chosen for him. He called it the hardest year of his life. He used the word brutal. His father, King Charles, had also been diagnosed with cancer in that same stretch of time. Two of the people William loved most were fighting for their health at once, and he was trying to hold an entire institution steady around them. When you carry that context with you, the radio confession and the hospital revelation stop being sound bites. They become the sound of two people exhaling after holding their breath for 2 years. That brings us to what Kate actually went to the Christie to champion, because the message underneath the emotion was a deliberate one. Her visit was built around a single idea, that beating cancer is about far more than the medicine. She toured the treatment center, but she also spent time in the spaces dedicated to emotional well-being, to art therapy, to the kind of spiritual and psychological support that helps a patient stay whole while their body is under siege. She spoke about how the disease changes you not only physically, but emotionally, a truth she could speak to from the inside. This is the part of cancer care that rarely makes the news, the long, invisible work of helping people feel like themselves again. And Kate, drawing on her own experience, used her platform to put a spotlight on exactly that. There was a lighter thread woven through the day too, the kind that reminds you these are real people. She spent time with younger patients on the teenage and young adult unit, and at one point fell into a conversation about her own children's wildly different taste in music. She met a young boy in the middle of his own treatment, hugged him, and told him he had been brilliant and to stay strong, a small exchange that drew a chorus of soft ahwas from the people watching. These were not grand gestures. They were the ordinary kindnesses of someone who understands that on a cancer ward, a hug and a bit of warmth can matter as much as anything on the chart. So what does all of this actually reveal about the monarchy that is coming? Take a step back and look at the shape of it. For generations, the royal model was distance, mystery, a careful wall between the public face and the private person, the belief that the crown drew its power from being unknowable. What William and Kate did in the space of these few weeks was the opposite of that. They let people in. Kate could have continued saying nothing about the personal cost of her illness, and no one would have blamed her. Instead, she chose to speak the truth that her family had suffered alongside her, because she understood that her honesty might be a comfort to thousands of families living the same nightmare in anonymity. William could have kept his composure on the radio and offered a polished line about his wife's recovery. Instead, he admitted his family could not cope without her, because sometimes the most powerful thing a future king can do is sound exactly like every other frightened husband. This is a deliberate, quietly radical reinvention of what royalty is for. Not to float above ordinary life, but to stand inside it and say, "We have been there too." When you gather all of it together, the picture becomes hard to argue with. A surprise visit that put a future queen back in the very kind of room where she once sat as a patient. A revelation, spoken plainly, that cancer is a battle the whole family fights. A bell rung by a young mother named Claire, with a princess at her side who knew precisely what that sound was worth. A husband's confession on live radio that he could not manage without the woman he nearly lost. A 2-year journey from a huge shock in a video message to remission, recovery, and finally the freedom to talk about it. And underneath it all, a clear and human philosophy of care, that healing is emotional as much as it is medical. None of this was staged for spectacle. That is precisely why it cut through. In an age when the public is exhausted by performance and suspicious of polish, William and Kate offered something almost no institution offers anymore, which is the truth, gently told, by people who had earned the right to tell it. There's a reason the room at the Christie fell silent before it broke into applause, and a reason Claire's tears traveled further than any official statement could. We are watching the future king and queen decide, in real time, what kind of monarchy they want to lead. Not one built on grandeur and remove, but one built on the same things that hold ordinary families together: honesty, presence, and the courage to admit how much you need the people you love. Kate did not go to Manchester to make history. She went to thank the kind of people who once helped save her, and to sit with the ones still in the fight. But in doing so, and in finally letting the country see the private cost she had carried for 2 years, she may have shown us more about the heart of the crown's future than any ceremony ever could. So before you go, here is the whole of it in a single breath. A surprise hospital visit nobody saw coming. A private princess finally admitting that her family went through cancer with her. A young mother's bell, rung with a future queen beside her. A future king confessing on live radio that his family could not cope without his wife. A 2-year journey from diagnosis to remission, told at last in honest words. And a vision of a monarchy that leads not by standing apart, but by standing alongside. Every one of those moments was real. Every one of them happened in public, in plain sight, within a few short weeks. And together, they may have quietly told us more about William and Kate than the previous decade combined. If this story moved you the way it moved the people in that hospital room, take a second to like this video and subscribe, because we follow the Wales family and the wider royal story every single week, and there is far more to come. And tell me in the comments which moment stayed with you the most. Was it Claire ringing that bell? Was it William's confession on the radio? Or was it those 5 quiet words from Kate that said everything? I read every single one of your comments, and I'll see you in the next one.